Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to yet another supremely amazing session on a brand new chapter, which is one of the most awaited chapter by each one of you: Principles of Inheritance and Variation, part one of this chapter. Yeah, Shashank, I'm fine. How are you? Good evening, Calvin. So, in today's class, we are actually discussing with the topics Introduction to Mentalism and important definition or important terminologies which are related with this chapter. That is, those terms which we come across frequently while dealing with this chapter is the important terminologies which we are actually planning to discuss in today's class. Okay, so let's get started with this class. Part number one, principles of inheritance and variation. Those who are brand new to the channel, don't forget to join our Telegram group at t.me/neet_biopoint, where daily session updates, regular discussion, polls, quizzes, and interact with us takes place. Those who are watching the session right now, don't forget to hit the like button. Do share it with your friends, because this is one of the most difficult and most necessary chapter for all the NEET aspirants. So I'm going to explain this in a very, very simple manner, right from the basic concept of this chapter, which would definitely help you have a better score in your NEET exam questions based on this chapter. So let's get started with this chapter. Principles of inheritance and variation. So before we start the class, let me tell you a small story. That is, you just consider a small poor family where there are many children, more than 5, 6 children in that family. So in that family, their parents did not have a very good job or did not have a very good earning to look after the family in a very good manner. So, as the members of the family are more and the parents do not have the necessary needs or necessary income to satisfy the needs of the people or the members of the family, such was a family of Gregor Johann Mendel. Gregor Johann Mendel, who is known as the father of genetics, was also born in such kind of a family where the parents were so poor, the family was very, really, really poor. That is, they do not have the necessary income for their meals, even. Okay, so they don't have the money or the necessary commodities necessary for them for putting or meeting the both ends of their family. I hope you can hear me properly. Just give me thumbs up on the chat box if everything is fine and clear. I'm not receiving any. Yes, thank you so much, Calvin. Thank you. So, such was a family of father of genetics, that is Gregor Johann Mendel, where the parents were so poor. He came from such kind of a family where his parents was very, very poor, that they don't even have the capability to fill the stomach of their children even. So such hard background is for Gregor Johann Mendel. So what do actually the parents of their culture, okay, their culture actually what they planning to do when a child is born? They'll plan to send this child into monastery. If it's a boy, they would plan them to send to a monastery for their future, for securing or for making their future secure. That is, they'll be growing up like to become priests in churches, then fathers, all those things. So all was related with the church. So at the very tender age itself, these parents used to send their children to different monasteries for becoming monks, priests, all those things. So in the very little young Mendel itself, his parents, okay, in the very young little Mendel itself, his parents has found a spark about biology, that is about different concept. He was very eager even in his tender age to study, to learn more things. So their parents definitely for sure sent him to the monastery, where so many years back, without even having a very clear concept, without having even a minute clarity on the structure of nucleus or the structure of genes or chromosomes or genetic material or genetic unit, DNA, genes, nucleus, without having a knowledge of any of these, he discovered today known as genes. He discovered the substances which are today known as the genes. He called those substances as factors. He used the term factors for those substances. The genetic material, he used the term factors. After which Johansson actually renamed the factors as genes. Okay, Johansson actually renamed the factors as genes. One of the main reason why Gregor Johann Mendel's experiments was not successful or was actually a failure at his time was because he was the first person to combine biology with maths. He was the first person to combine biology with maths. So at that point of time, at the time of Gregor Johann Mendel, biology and maths were two different poles, like North Pole and South Pole. It was like two different poles or two different extremes. That is, a person who studies, who have a vast idea on biology, will never have a concept about maths, or a person who is well expert in maths won't have any idea about biology. But this person, Gregor Johann Mendel, was the first person to combine biology with maths, was the first person to combine biology with maths, such that most of the people, most of the professors were not able to understand what was actually he trying to convey. For example, in his experiments, in his record, there was ratios like 9 is to 3 is to 3 is to 1, 1 is to 2 is to 1, 3 is to 1, 1 is to 1. So different ratios were included in his. Okay, Calvin. So different ratios like 9 is to 3 is to 1, 1 is to 2 is to 1, 3 is to 1, and 1 is to 1. He used different mathematical numbers over here, which was combined with biology, which made the professors actually very difficult to understand what he was trying to convey to them. So let's start with this chapter. Gregor Johann Mendel is known as the father of genetics. Gregor Johann Mendel was born in 1822 in a small village which is now known as the Czech Republic. He was born in 1822 in a small village which is now Czech Republic. He was a priest at a monastery. He was a priest at a monastery where he would teach and do research in natural science, where he would teach and do research in natural science. So he was a naturalist. One second, one second. Okay, he was a naturalist. He was doing his experiments with nature. Oh my god. Oh my god, my writings may not be clear. So if you need any spellings, please inform me. Okay. Some issues have happened. That's why. Okay. So, he was born in 1822 in a small village which is now known as the Czech Republic. He was a priest at a monastery where he would teach and do research in natural science. He studied maths and science at the University of Vienna. Is it clear? So he was the first person to combine biology. So he was the first person to combine biology with maths, since which or because of which his experiments was not accepted by the scientists or the persons, botanists, zoologists of his time. So from 1857 to 1863, he crossed and catalogued around 24,034 plants through several generations. Comment me on the chat box the plant which he used for all his experiments, for all his genetical experiments. What is the name of the plant which he used? What is the name of the plant which he used for all his experiments? No answers. This class would be an utter failure if the chat box is going to be remaining silent like this. Very simple question. Yes, it is the garden pea. Pisum sativum or the garden pea. Garden pea or Pisum sativum is actually the plant which he used for his genetical experiments. So he is known as the father of genetics because he was the first, without even having an idea of nucleus or genes or DNA, he discovered the entire concept of heredity. He was the first person, he was the first scientist to apply, he was the first scientist to apply mathematics to biology. Mendel found that individual traits are determined by discrete factors, later known as genes by Johansen, was inherited from the parents to the offsprings. In 1866, Mendel published his work in the Brno Medical Society Organization's journal, which is not actually a well exposed magazine. That's also one of the reasons why his works was not considered, or why his works didn't be, why his works didn't gain as successful as what he thought, because he published his work in a very local magazine which was not actually a well circulated one, so the people were not able, so many people were not able to understand or know about what he was trying to do. Okay, so he was one of the first scientists to apply mathematics to biology. That is the one reason why his works was a failure. Second one, he published his work in a very local magazine. In a very local magazine, which was not a well circulated one, because of which his works was of not successful. So listen over here. That is Mendel found that individual traits. What do you mean by traits? Traits means characters. Traits means characters are determined by discrete factors which are known as gene. What is actually discrete? Discrete means packed. Discrete means packed. For example, for example, for a plant to be tall, it should have a pair. It should have a pair of factors, capital T, small t, or capital T, capital T. Right? It should have discrete factors, that is, they are packed or paired factors. Paired or packed factors. So he found that the transmission of these characters from parents to offspring is because of different traits or genes present inside our body. Listen, everyone. For example, a plant. For example, this is one plant. Okay, this plant is 100 centimeter long, and this is another plant. This is another plant which is actually 50 centimeter long. Okay, so are the genes or the characters present on both these plants the same? The answer is to be no, because even though this is a tall plant, the character which determines it will be the tallness. Okay, so a gene which determines the tallness of the plant are present in plant number A, whereas in plant number B, it is actually dwarf or short as compared to the tall plant. Okay, so they're determined by packed features. Let's discuss something more about Gregor Mendel. He discovered the fundamental laws of inheritance. Gregor Johann Mendel, one of his work was he discovered the fundamental laws of inheritance. Can you please be active on the chat box so that I would be able to know whether there is anybody there? Should I move fast? Should I move slow or whatever? So, Mendel discovered Mendel discovered the fundamental laws of inheritance. That is, he discovered the laws of dominance, law of purity of gametes, law of independent assortment. He deduced that genes come in pairs. Okay, Mendel said that genes always comes in pairs and are inherited as distinct unit from one parent to the child. Mendel tracked the segregation of the parental genes and their appearance in the offspring as dominant and recessive traits. In case of genetics, we will be writing the dominant traits using uppercase letters or capital letters and the recessive trait with the help of small letters. I hope these concepts you know. Capital letters indicates dominant trait, small letters determine the recessive trait. For example, when we are considering a white, something else should be considered, right? Round seed, then capital R denotes dominant round seed. Small r determines what the wrinkled recessive gene. Wrinkled recessive gene. This is the round dominant seed. Is it? So he recognized the mathematical patterns of inheritance from one generation to the another. As we move forward, we will be coming across different ratios, 9 is to 3 is to 3 is to 1. Then 1 is to 2 is to 1, 3 is to 1. So all these are different ratios which will be come across as the chapter goes forward. So in this slide, you have to be very important in reading the concept. He discovered the fundamental laws of inheritance. He deduced that genes always comes in pairs. Okay, these two are the important points which you have to be clear in this slide. Now we are going to discuss some of the important terms which are actually coming in this chapter. So let's get started. First term is the genetics. Genetics is the study of heredity and variation, or the study of genes and chromosome is known as genetics. Genetics can be the study of heredity and variation. Heredity and variation, or study of genes and chromosomes. So genetics can be defined as the study of heredity and variation, and also it can be told as the study of genes and chromosome. Next one is the heredity. The second term is the heredity. It is a resemblance between the offspring and the parents. Okay. So heredity can be defined. Genetics is a study of heredity and variation, or study of genes and chromosome. Heredity can be defined as the resemblance between offspring and their parents. Okay, these two are the first two terms. First term is the genetics, second term is the heredity, third one is the variation. Variation is actually the difference between parents and offspring. Okay, variation can be defined as the difference between parents and offspring. We may not be resembling the same as that of our parents, right? There is some kind of one or the other difference between we and the parents. So that difference between the offspring and the parents, or that is actually a very important question. Okay, you should be very careful. Variation doesn't only mean that the difference between parents and offspring. It can be the variation with parents and offspring, or offspring to offspring. Okay, between the siblings also may not be looking identical even. They may have certain similar feature, but they not be whole identically equal, right? So that can also be coming under as variation. Whereas heredity is the resemblance. Heredity and variation are two opposite things. Heredity, the resemblance of the character; variation, difference between the parents and the offspring. Next term is the inheritance. You know, inheritance means the transmission of characters from parents to offspring. Next is the alleles, or you'll call it as the allelomorph. It is an alternate form of a gene. Alternate form of a gene. For example, tall. Capital T stands for tall. The alternate allele is small t. That is the recessive allele. Capital T stands for dominant. Small t stands for dwarf. Okay, so what is dominant character? We have already discussed what is dominant character. Dominant character means the character which is actually expressed. The character which is actually getting expressed in a progeny. It is indicated with the help of the capital letter. Capital T, tall. Capital W, small w. Axial flowers. Okay, round seed. So, so this capital letters indicate the dominant trait. Okay, so the dominant trait is a character which is actually expressed. It is indicated with a capital letter. So for tallness, capital T is the dominant trait. For round seeds, capital R is the dominant trait. For axial flowers, A is the dominant. Capital A is the dominant trait. So genetics is the study of heredity and variation, or study of genes and chromosome. Heredity, resemblance between the offsprings and their parents. Variation is actually the difference between the parents and the offspring. Inheritance is the transmission of characters from parents to offspring. Alleles is the alternate form of a gene. Dominant trait is the character which is actually getting expressed, the character which is getting expressed in the progeny or the offspring. For example, it can be of any types. White is the dominant. If in the question it is given like white is a dominant trait, if white flowers are dominant, then you'll indicate the white flowers, since they are dominant, you'll indicate them with the capital W, letter capital W. Okay, if it is a recessive trait, if capital W is a recessive trait, then you will indicate it with the small w. Okay, any type questions can be framed in any way. Okay, sometimes it will be like fused ear lobes and free ear lobe, fused ear lobe and free ear lobes. So it's our wish to take which letter as being the dominant, which is the recessive, all those things. So here we'll be taking like fused is the dominant, small f will be the free ear lobes. Okay, it's our wish to take whether which is to be dominant, which is to be recessive in case of questions. When the questions came, okay, next is the recessive character. So dominant we have discussed, the character which is getting expressed, it's the dominant. Recessive character is actually the character which is actually getting suppressed. For example, let me tell you. In a plant, the genes or the trait is capital T, small t. Because of the presence of this dominant trait or the dominant allele for tallness, the plant is generally tall. The plant only becomes tall. The gene which is actually recessive, the small t stands for recessive gene. So, because of the presence of a very dominant gene, what happens? The recessive trait gets suppressed, or it doesn't have the ability to express itself because much more power is there for the dominant gene. Okay, just imagine a fat boy and a small boy. A fat boy and a small boy, you just imagine. Fat boy is more dominant. So if they both stand in a line, if the fat boy is standing in front of the small boy or a lean boy, what happens? The lean boy is not able to be visible by the person standing in the front, because since the fat boy is having a very uh, large physique, the person is not able to see. Exactly over here, since the dominant trait is very strong, it just gets suppresses, it suppresses the recessive trait. I hope it's clear. No one is responding. I don't know whether there is anyone listening in the class or whether there would be anyone. I have no idea. Anyway, it's my duty, since I have promised I'm completing the chapter. So that is the recessive character. The character which is indicated with a small letter is the recessive character. Next is the homozygous and heterozygous. Next two terms are the homozygous and the heterozygous. The condition in which the chromosome pair carries similar alleles of a gene. For example, capital T, small t, capital Y, small y. So all these are homologous alleles or homologous condition. That is capital W, small w, capital Y, small y. So all these are carrying the particular chromosome pair carries similar alleles of a gene. Whereas in heterozygous condition, they carry dissimilar alleles. For example, capital T, small y, capital Y, small y. They are heterozygous in nature. Phenotype is the visible characters, the physical expression of an individual is the phenotype, whereas genotype is the genetic constitution of a character. Phenotype is what we observe. Phenotype is what we observe. For example, capital T, the phenotype is tall. That is, for a plant carrying the gene like capital T, we observe tallness. For a plant carrying capital A, the flower will be axial. That is what we observe. We cannot just go inside the flower and see whether what is the phenotype. We observe the final phenotype of that plant or that flower. If the phenotype or if the genetic constitution over there is capital A, we observe the phenotype as axial, or the dominant trait would be expressed. I think I should end the class right now because it's showing 0 watching. Next, Pisum sativum. Pisum sativum is the garden pea. Pisum sativum is the garden pea, which was actually the plant which was used by Gregor Johann Mendel for his experiments. So many pea varieties were available. The reasons, now we are actually discussing the reasons why Mendel used Pisum sativum as the plant, why he cannot choose some other plant for his experiment. The first and the foremost important reason is many varieties of peas were available. Tall pea plant is there, dwarf pea plant is there, pea plant containing yellow seeds are there, green seeds are there, ringled pod shape varies, flower shape varies, flower position varies. So different varieties were available for pea plants. Peas are very small and easy to grow. Very little cultivation expenses are only there for growing peas, since they are very small plant and is easy to grow. Pea can self-fertilize or can be cross-fertilized. Pea can be self-fertilized or can be cross-fertilized. They have a short lifespan. Very important previous year MCQ question. Okay, pea is having a very short lifespan. Very short lifespan, and they are actually annual plants. They are actually annuals or annual plant, that is, they flowers every 1 year. Okay, they flower every. Yes, Calvin, these are the reasons why he selected the pea plants, because many varieties were available. It is very small and easy to grow. It can be self-fertilized and cross-fertilized. They have a very short lifespan. This very short lifespan is a very important question. They are annual plant which flowers in every 1 year. So every 1 year he can change out. Every 1 year, if his experiment getting failed, also after 1 year he can restart that. So very small duration of 1 year only is necessary for growing a new plant. So that is why he selected the Pisum sativum. Exactly, as we move forward, we'll come across Drosophila melanogaster also. There also you have the similar question, why Morgan selected Drosophila melanogaster for his experiments. Exactly the same thing happens over here also. Why did Mendel? A question may come for you the Neet exam, like which of the following is the characteristic or the criteria why Mendel choose the plant Pisum sativum or garden pea for his genetical experiments. Okay, next is the 7 traits. Very important. You have a small quiz after this. You have a very small quiz after this. So be very careful so that you can get the questions answered. Okay. So 7 traits were selected. 7 traits were selected. So guys, the 7 traits, just comment me how many varieties, how many contrasting pairs were there for Mendel's experiment. Count all, single column over here. One trait is round, one is wrinkled, yellow, green, purple, white, axial, terminal, tall, short, inflated, constricted, green, yellow. How many are there? Total of 14. Neet 2020 question. Neet 2020 paper question. Phase 1. You all might have encountered or come across this question for your Neet 2020 exam. I'm sure about it. Okay. So this was actually most of your answers were 7, but you have to just multiply it with 2 because contrasting pairs are used. So 14 different traits were used. Contrasting character was used by Mendel for his experiment. So Mendel selected 7 pairs of true breeding garden pea, Pisum sativum. For example, the first one is the seed shape. Seed shape, round, dominant trait, recessive trait is the ringled. Okay, seed shape. I'll tell you seed shape, seed color, pod shape, pod color, flower position, flower color, and the plant height are the different pairs of breeding varieties of garden pea selected by Mendel. So first is the seed shape, which is actually round is the dominant, ringled is the green. All these are previous year MCQ question. Seed color. Seed color first is the yellow. Seed color yellow is the dominant. Green is the recessive. Green is the recessive. But here it is interchange. For pod color, green is the dominant. Yellow is the recessive trait. This is previous year MCQ question. This is previous year MCQ question. Okay, hope it's clear. Nobody responding, so I'm not able to get to know. So I'm continuing anyway. I don't know what's going to happen. So seed color, yellow is dominant, green is recessive, but for pod color, green is dominant and yellow is recessive. Flower color, purple is dominant, white is recessive. Flower position, axial dominant, terminal recessive. Plant height, very frequently used to think short, tall. Pod color, inflated dominant, constricted recessive. So these are the different 7 varieties used by Mendel. Seed color, seed shape, pod color, pod shape. Seed color, yellow is dominant, green is recessive, but for pod color, green is dominant, yellow is recessive. Okay. I hope it's clear. So for seeds, for taking seeds into criteria, you will have the shape of the seed and the color. So seed can be round, dominant. Seeds can be ringled, recessive. For color, yellow as the dominant, green recessive. If you're taking flowers as a criteria, then white is the recessive, violet or purple is the dominant. Pod color, inflated dominant, constricted recessive. Pod, that is pod shape, pod color, green is dominant, green is dominant, yellow is recessive. Axial pods dominant, terminal pod recessive. Tall is dominant, short is recessive. Yes, Calvin, I'll provide the PDF of the session. So please try to comment me the answer. So the last we are going to discuss about the Mendel's hybridization experiment. The last part of today's class is the Mendel's hybridization experiments. First of all, Mendel selected 2 pea plants. Okay, Mendel selected 2 pea plants with contrasting character. So here Mendel have selected, or here we are going to discuss about Mendel selected a plant which is having violet flowers and contrasting character violet and white. So for violet, what is actually capital V for small, small v, small v. Okay. So what he have done first is like he removed the anthers. And the process of removal of anthers, you will call them as emasculation. Previous year MCQ question. Repeated question. Removal of anthers is emasculation. Why is emasculation done? To avoid self-pollination. After the anthers are removed, what happens? The same thing is bagged. So emasculation, after emasculation, bagging takes place. So why bagging is necessary? To avoid the deposition of unwanted pollen grain. Collection of pollen grain from other plant male parent and transfer it to the parent female parent, and that is referred to as the pollination. So collection and germination of seeds to produce the offspring. I will show you something. I'll show you something. Look, this is a violet flower. This is the violet, so it is having a trait like capital V, purple. So I'm taking capital V as the trait. Okay, capital V, capital V. Okay, capital V, capital V. The other parent from which the pollen grain. So the male, look, the male anthers are emasculated. So removed anthers from the purple plant, which is referred to as the emasculation. Emasculation happens. So after emasculation, the plant is bagged, and what happens is like white flower, that is, you'll call them as small v, small v. So what is going to happen is like capital V is crossed with small v, small v. Okay, so what all plants you'll observe is like capital V, small v, capital V, small v, capital V, small v, capital V, small v. So at least if one dominant trait, if at least one allele for a dominant trait is present, what happens? At least one dominant trait is present, the plant will exhibit that dominant trait only. So all the plants which we observe in the F1 generation will be violet. Okay, I'll enlarge the diagram for you so that you can make it clear. Yes. Look, removed anthers from the purple plant. Okay, first of all, we selected a parent, then we emasculated that plant. Okay, look, the anthers are cut down. Okay, then you're transferring the sperm bearing pollen from the stamen of the white flower to the egg bearing carpel of the purple flower. Okay, so this plant is oh my god. This plant is capital V, or I'll write it with P, purple. Capital P. This white flower is small p, small p. So if I draw a Punnett square for this, capital P, small p, small p, capital P, small p, capital P, small p, capital P, small p. So all these are capital P, small p, which is actually capital P is dominant. So the dominant trait will only get we can expect in the F1 generation. So it is violet. Offsprings are obtained. Look, F1 generation, all flowers are purple. Okay. So let's move on to the question. I need you guys to answer the same. Okay, I need you guys to answer the same. Moving on to the question number 1 based on today's class. I don't know whether someone would respond or when. Question number 1. On which plant Mendel had carried out his investigation? Garden pea, wild pea, cow pea, pigeon pea. On which plant Mendel had carried out his investigation? Mendel carried out his experiments. So we studied right from the beginning onwards. Mendel has used Pisum sativum, which is the common name is the garden pea. Absolutely, Calvin. One answer is A. So garden pea is the correct answer for this question. So Pisum sativum, or the garden pea, is actually the plant which Mendel has used for his investigation. Previous year AIPMT question. Second question. So garden pea is the correct answer. Second question. During breeding, the removal of anthers from a flower is referred to as. During breeding, the removal of anthers anthesis, pollination, emasculation, vasectomy. Absolutely, the correct answer is emasculation because we have right now studied right emasculation. Emasculation is the answer. Okay, so all these are previous year question. This is also previous year question. Third question. How many characters? Read the question very carefully. Read the question very carefully and answer. How many characters of P pod were chosen by Mendel? How many characters of P pod were chosen by Mendel? Calvin, read the question very carefully. Read the question very, very carefully. How many characters? I'm going to highlight it for you. How many characters? How many characters of P pods? Not asking about characters, asking here only about how many P ports were used. How many P ports were used? Only about P ports. Okay. The correct answer is 2. Okay. The correct answer for this question is 2. Because here we were talking only about the P ports. When I taught that also, I told you very important, you have to be very careful. P port, constricted, inflated. Okay. Constricted, inflated. Right, everyone. So how many characters of P pod were chosen by Mendel? It is 2, that is constricted and inflated are the two. We have studied it, right? Next question. One of the following did not constitute. One of the following did not constitute. One of the following did not constitute the 7 contrasting pairs of character noticed by Mendel. Height of the plant, shape of the leaf, shape of the pod, color of the pods. Answers on the chat box, everyone. So we studied 7 different characters which is chosen by Mendel, in which we haven't studied one out of the 4 given options. So which is it? Guys, we studied about the tall dwarf. Oh my god. Exactly, it is 4B. Okay, shape of the leaf. Anyway, let me tell you. For height of the plant, we studied the plants may be tall. The plants may be tall is there, dwarf is there. Pod shape, we studied green is there, yellow is there. For color, sorry, for shape of the pod, we studied like constricted is there, inflated is there, yellow is there, green is there for the color of the pod. So among this, we haven't studied about the shape of the leaf. Okay, shape of the leaf is the answer for this question. So the correct answer is shape of the leaf for B. Let's do question number 5, last and final question of today's class and today's session number 1. According to Mendelism, which character is showing dominance? That's why I told you to listen very carefully when I taught this. Which show dominance? Terminal position of flower, green color in seed coat, ringled seed, green pod color. Terminal position or axial position, which is dominant? Green color or yellow color of the seed pod, which is dominant. Ringled seed or round seed, which is dominant. Green pod color or yellow pod color, which is showing dominant. Getting confused. I'm very sure you got confused with this question because you haven't paid your full attention in the class. The correct answer is option B, green pod color. Very good. Green pod color, because we have already discussed. Because we have already discussed over here, right? Took some time for saying the answer, that's why I told. So green pod color is the dominant, yellow pod color is the recessive trait. So that was the final question for the day. Thank you guys. See you in the next class with some other second part of this mono hybrid cross. I hope part 1 of this chapter is completely clear for each one of you in the class. I hope everything was fine, perfectly clear. So the date when I come out, till the date when I come out with the second part of this chapter, you have to be thoroughly revising. So at the second time, I won't be explaining what is gene, what is phenotype. At those time, I'll be telling those terms only. So at that time, don't ask me what is phenotype, what is gene. You have to be very thorough. Practice all the MCQs related with this topic. Okay. So bye bye, guys. See you in the next class.